Hey, so I'm going to be reviewing clients which I've purchased for myself, and I'm going to give my honest opinion on them. This is because I see very few people doing that for Minecraft cheats, and the majority just bring up very few negative aspects of clients. I instead intend to give a balanced review and help you decide what's best for you. To start off with this, I'm going to be giving my opinion on Icarus Client. Though before starting, I must mention that Icarus hasn't been updated since the 12th of January 2024. I'll also mention that it's focused on strict anti-cheats such as Intave and Polar, so therefore servers such as GoMHD. It'll perform worse than other clients on anti-cheats such as Falcon, since it's not designed with those in mind, although it will bypass. From my experience using Icarus Client, I found it to be quite weird with quite a few issues. There's a lot of issues with the user interface, for instance. When you launch the client, it will always go to the original theme's home screen, but whenever you change screens, it'll then update. Maximizing the client without changing screens will just produce a white window until you unmaximize it. Some of the text boxes do not function correctly. This includes the server name text box, where it's just blurred and you cannot read what you've written. Scrolling in the CSGO theme glitch UI is also very rough, and it's produced with a mediocre quality. This is especially in comparison to what is mimicking. Never lose. The mode selection in the CSGO theme glitch UI also hides the current mode from the list. I found this to be really confusing when quickly changing modes, as it makes me question what I've changed and what's happened and why has it disappeared. The modern theme glitch UI also sometimes doesn't render correctly. This may include not applying a shadow or the blur just being delayed. The modern theme glitch UI also doesn't let you change settings below a mode if it's open, and it'll sometimes just refuse to change settings at all, and I can't pinpoint a reason for this. Rounded rectangles may also not be rendered correctly when using the modern theme, and this causes very odd visuals. The modern theme's array list also has a 1 pixel gap between modules. You also can't turn off certain features of the HUD, such as a custom hotbar. You can only ever have the HUD on or completely off. Throughout the client, there's also overlapping between elements, such as the buttons in the home screen, joining servers using any theme, and some kick messages using any theme. Additionally, there's also an inconsistency in design. You can see this when using the modern theme home screen. The center panel is blurred, but buttons below are not. Additionally, settings will sometimes be hidden but also have an effect on the module. You can see this with adjust rotations in scaffold. It's only visible with semi-rage scaffold, but affects legit and legit fast. There's also a lot more issues than this which I've noticed with the user interface, though a majority are quite small and quite frankly only a select few matter. The client's kill aura is exceptionally good. It's highly consistent, powerful, and customizable. You can modify the CPS speed before and whilst in combat, as well as the number of clicks to force. It's also adaptive with the ability to force the first hit, use double clicks, adaptively influence the CPS, and stop whilst tick basing. The rotations are also extensively customizable. To understand how the rotation settings work, you first have to have a basic understanding of how the client finds rotations. From my experience using the client, I can tell how the kill aura will create a sphere and randomly plots points to check for rotations on the outside of it. This sphere is located at where the client deems the most optimal position is to deal knockback. This is typically the closest to where you are looking. The radius of the sphere is between two boundaries defined in the settings. The further away you are, the closer the sphere is to the maximum radius. Knowing this, you can control the minimum and maximum radius of the sphere, as well as the number of points to create and check. Typically, the higher the number of points, the less randomization in rotations. One nice feature of this is that you can set the number of points to 1. This singular point will then stay centered and consistent regardless of the sphere. Additionally, you can choose a heuristic to search for the optimal rotation. The smoothing of rotations is also customizable, but it's only to a limited extent. You can select from 3 different modes. Bezier curve, though this mode is not customizable. Distribution, this mode is pretty customizable. You have the ability to control the rotation speed as well as the correlation between the speed of the yacht and the pitch. And linear, this is also pretty customizable, but you can only control the minimum and maximum rotation speed. Unlike many other clients, there's also 3 different GCD correction options. Off, where no GCD correction is applied, Minecraft, which is the standard GCD correction, and Custom, which I'm actually unsure of how it works, but you can customize the accuracy using it. Personally, I see this as a neat but small feature available. I've only used the Minecraft GCD correction mode. The kill aura is weak in terms of determining who to target though. For instance, filtering players, you can define the FOV, reach, reaction time, and whether the target is invisible. For finding targets, you can only select players or everything. For sourcing targets, you can only choose from distance, FOV, health, and hurt time. There is no adaptive selection, which will use a heuristic to identify the most optimal target, which is implemented in other clients such as Moon and Augustus. Additionally, there is an issue where it will flicker whilst targeting someone. They may not move and the killer will just randomly stop attacking them, reset rotations, and then rotate back. Furthermore, the wall check does not always detect walls. This is prominently when I am diagonal to the player behind the wall. Now, the client scaffold is actually pretty weak. It struggles to clutch and it works in a very odd manner. The scaffold's block selection is very poor. It frequently chooses to place more blocks than optimal and chooses locations to place blocks where there is simply no need. Though the scaffold is split into 4 different modes: Eject, legit fast, semi-rage, and rage. Each one has its own issues and benefits. Legit is prone to falling unless you have adjust rotation enabled or you use some form of prediction. Using either of these and it works well, and it bypasses polar even. It's intended to simulate ninja bridging, but you can get close to god bridging with it, although it's not full on god bridging. Legit by default sneaks at the edge of each block, but you can override this by using sneak prediction or sneak after blocks. Legit fast is like legit, but it sneaks in intervals of 2 and is much less prone to falling. Though using it alongside sneak after blocks or sneak prediction will cause it to fall. Semi-rage is weird. It seems like its intent is for god bridging, but it does not feel finished and seems really close to legit fast. Rage is much closer to your typical scaffold, but it is absolutely ridden with issues. It can clutch, but not far and frequently fails. The rotations are backwards of where you are facing. It does not consider your movement, meaning that if you are walking backwards, you're actually walking forwards. To place blocks, if it cannot calculate a pitch, it will calculate the yaw and then place the block, but it will not retain this yaw, meaning that it will only last 1 tick. As a result of this, on anti-cheats such as Intave, it commonly ghost blocks when clutching. Furthermore, the scaffold doesn't place any blocks whilst I'm going upwards and moving. If I'm moving, it will only ever place whilst I'm falling or on ground. This means that I cannot bridge upwards whilst moving. Considering all these factors, it makes the scaffold very weird to use. Similar to the Kill Aura, the backtrack is quite powerful and it's sufficient for anti-cheats such as Polar and Intave. I quite frankly had no issues with it and no complaints about it. Although the tick base is not as customizable, it is again sufficient. It would be nice to have mode selection like Eject, Rue, and Moon, where I can change between, for instance, future and past tick base. Some other things I would like to mention is that Icarus' speed bypasses are lacking and differentiate in consistency. For instance, some speed modes are constantly jumping or moving. Icarus' combat modules are really high quality. This can be seen with the W-tap, which is customizable, although it can lack on explanation of what settings do, which can also be seen with the W-tap since it does not specify what legit or rage W-tap actually does, and it leaves it up to the user's interpretation. Icarus also lacks on quite a few trivial details. For instance, if you're using legit no-fall, it won't pick up the water after landing. The visuals of Icarus are basic but sufficient and pleasant. This is perfectly demonstrated by the ESP. It's sufficient for usage but nothing too complex. The ESP only supports outlines, boxes, corners, health bars and name tags. Other than that, you cannot customize anything apart from the color of the ESP and the radius and intensity for the outlines. It can be applied to players, mobs, and animals though. For chests, you can either apply a box or an outline. The box can be applied to all chests or hidden chests only. Other than that, you can only customize the color of the ESP and the radius and intensity for the outlines. The bed ESP can only apply a box and you can only customize the color of it. Other than ESP, there is other visual fundamentals such as name tags, tracers, and trajectories, but it's also missing features such as ambience and full bright. Gameplay with the client is not too bad, but its performance depends per playstyle. When playing game modes such as Skywars and Bed Wars, I prefer to be much more aggressive. This client's not always sufficient to this, and it primarily fails due to faults within the scaffold. The client is priced at €25 for lifetime and €15 for a month. Beta is also available for €9 but currently has nothing additional. I personally purchased the lifetime and beta, and I would say that lifetime is slightly overpriced. 1 month is extremely overpriced. In fact, beta is not worth purchasing right now because it provides nothing additional and it only shows up in tab. My overall thoughts of Icarus are quite mixed. I find the client quite fun to play on, but it's not worth purchasing as a client you'd primarily use. For its price range, I would personally recommend purchasing either Eject or Moon. Please consider the pros and cons of each client though when purchasing, because no client's perfect. For instance, Eject's aura mitigates on Polar, and Moon's not had a build in over 7 months. Or of course you can choose a free option. I'd personally recommend Liquidbounce Nextgen, though there is very few free options which will bypass it in saving Polar.